Good afternoon, everybody. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our session here with ETH meets Berlin, Rethinking Materiality. My name is Chris Lubkeman. I am the head of Foresight at the ETH in Zurich, and I'll be your host today for our session. We'll be spending about an hour together, plus or minus. It's my first time here in the museum. It's an incredible location, the Museum für Naturkunde here in Berlin. And we're surrounded by this room right now where we're in with incredibly beautiful stuffed birds of all different colors and shapes and sizes from around the world. And we were walking around a little bit before. I think anything and everything has been jarred or stuffed to be displayed here. It's been quite incredible. This event is part of the Berlin Science Week. And this is a time when Berlin's science community brings international scientists and the science-driven organizations together to have a stage to share insights into some current topics, discuss grand challenges, and quite frankly, to envision our future together. And this is really what our session today is going to be about when we're thinking about where materials are heading. We're combining for this living materials. So the topic, all of us feel and know that we're at the cusp of many great changes around the world, economically, politically, from a climate standpoint, but we're also at a cusp in the change in the way we fundamentally understand the opportunities which science is presenting to us, and especially in materials. We're able to now do things which frankly the grandfathers and grandmothers in material science just even dreamt about. And now we're at the cusp of being able to do that. To be able to integrate smart materials in our built environment, to be able to mix sort of living and non-living items together, and to actually look at 3D printed structures. It's almost impossible to imagine an end to what we can do. And this meeting today is really about a conversation. So I'm happy to be here, and we have 3 guests, so you don't really want to hear me talk much longer. I'm going to be hosting. We're going to make sure we close at an hour. We're going to have 3 short presentations, sort of brain food, and then we're going to have a chance for you to ask questions, and you online as well. You're going to be able to ask questions through Slido. I encourage you to pop your questions in. I'll do my very best to integrate them into our conversation. And we'll have microphones here for in the room. So our 3 guests. First, we have Christina Sauer. She's an architect and a professor for material design at the Weissensee School. This is hard to see here. I'm going to come into the Weissensee School of Art and Design here in Berlin. Sort of a homie, as we would say. In her work, she bridges material experimentation and design implementation, focusing on textile structures and active materials. So, Christina, welcome. Come on up. Let's give her a hand. Say, well, come on. That's okay.
Hello.
Come on.
Thank you.
Here we go. And then.
Thank you.
Yep.
Very happy to be here today.
Great. Now I'm going to bring all 3 on stage. All right?
Yep.
Okay. And second, we have Mark Tibbett. Mark Tibbett is an assistant professor of macromolecular engineering at the ETH in Zurich. His research focuses on the interface between living and non-living materials. And very specifically, he engineers soft materials to guide and control living systems for engineering design. Let's welcome Mark. Mark, welcome. Come on up. Hello. Fantastic. And last and not least, I've got to find my note on my friend Massimo Portincaso. He was the co-founder and executive chairman of the Officine. Did I get it right? Officine Bio. His first distributed biofurnace. Say his first, because I'm sure he'll do a lot more. He's also the chairman of Hello Tomorrow, an investor and advisor to startups and deep tech funds. We got to know each other when he was the former managing director and partner at Boston Consulting, and is a renowned author and speaker on deep tech. His work has been featured in many magazines and places, on stages, Fast Company, Bloomberg, Harvard Business Review, et cetera, et cetera. So let's welcome Massimo. Okay, So, as I said, our time together is now about 55 minutes, and Christiana's going to give a first impulse, and then Mark, and then Massimo, and then we're going to talk for a little bit, and then you're going to get to ask all the questions you would like to ask. So,
That's a perfect
Christiana?
tool. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, very happy to present to you today my perspective on new materials or designing materials. So as an architect, as a designer, of course, materiality plays a central role. I want to talk to you today about the idea of fiber in material design. So fibers we can also find, of course, in nature everywhere, and it's super interesting because fiber exists throughout the scales. So from fibers being produced by bacteria, as we see here in this bacterial cellulose biofilm, to fibers that are produced, of course, in wood, as we know, up to biological fibers like muscle fibers, fibrils, and tendons, for example. All these fibers throughout the scales, it's super interesting because, of course, they fulfill a certain functionality. And that can be protection or, of course, food generation and so on. So I try if that works now. Yeah, perfect. So as designers, if we want to design with fibers, textile technology is, of course, at hand. So textile is not a material per se, but it is an operation for bringing different materialities together, as we see here in this knot. So this knot could actually be produced from, let's say, woolen fiber or, let's say, metal wires. And in each case, it would have a totally different property for the overall material system. So that's something we are interested in when we design with fibers. Looking at, okay, I have to see here. Sorry, that was too fast. Yeah, looking at this yarn here, for example, it is a yarn made from cellulose, and when the humidity in the surrounding increases, this yarn starts moving, which it should do now. No, you don't see it. And because this yarn is moving, the whole surface, which can be created from that, can be, we call that, so physical programming, actually. So the swelling is coming into place because the fibers, the cellulose fibers, they increase in diameter, and therefore by the twist of the yarn, I can really program this yarn in which direction to move, and I can program even this weave in which direction to bend and to fold and so on, by the pattern of the weave, by the direction of the weave, by the strength of the twill. So we can program and design material by designing the yarn and designing in a higher hierarchy than the textile surface. And if we think of that like a larger screen, suddenly we're in architectural scale, and we can create these screens that can really interact with the environment, for example, for climate purposes, and they rely really on this very small initial movement only of the cellulose fiber swelling with humidity. We were then transferring this idea into really facade scale. Of course, we had to change materiality, and we were working here with these smart wires, which is shape memory alloy wires. They react not to humidity, but to temperature, and with increasing temperature, they change their shape. So what we did, also the same principle, we interpret these small elements as a fiber for a larger surface. We put them in a textile structure, and by this we can really bridge the scales and have a very small but very active component into, let's say, a surface which can cover a whole high-rise building. This screen then would react to the outer temperature. Let's say sun shines on it. At that moment, the screen is closing and protects the interior from overheating without any further electricity or energy needed. So really autarkic system. Here you can see two of the facade demonstrators, which we are just testing in real environments in different climate zones. And finally, I'm showing you small movies about that. these elements are also called muscle wires. Probably you see, so the smooth movement really relates to the movement of muscles. And so the other one here, it's another system. It's not caused on buckling and bending, but this one really on sliding of two different planes, one against each other, and creating this dense or not so dense sunscreen. So to sum it up, my quick introduction into the world of designing materials from the view of architecture, what we imagine or what we dream of as architects is really that we don't think of our architectures and buildings as barriers where we want to protect us with a maximum amount of material against the environment, but rather to really make use of the environment, make use of nature, to interact with it, like a skin, you could say, and generate energy and get in exchange with water and ventilation through wind and all these things. So it's really a rethinking not only of the materiality, but this has an impact in the way we could think about building and about the deployment of amount of materials, for example, which should be used then for buildings. So that was a quick insight from myself.
Cool. Thank you, Christiana. That's really cool. Thank you very much. Give her a hand. So it's really as the shape changes with the environment. This is really what you're trying to do. So you have reactive facades, reactive materials without extra energy being put into it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea of it.
So it's ambient energy, ambient moisture. Do they ever run out of like oomph? Do they keep going up and down, up and down? Do they get tired?
Well, I mean, there's always possibilities, of course, to kind of overrun the system for the user. This is really important. Yeah. That, for example, with a small electrical impulse, you could also change the system, but that would be only very, very small amount of energy. So you're not getting, caught or by the system. So yeah.
Cool. Great. Well, I think Mark, your presentation's ready.
I think so.
I think you're the perfect next one to carry on here.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Chris, and thank you all for being here. And I'm really excited to add to what Christiana said and add to this idea of rethinking materiality. And I'm here representing a group of faculty from ETH Zurich. And we're starting to think about how we can use living systems and bring them into non-living classic engineered materials. And engage with these living systems to add new functionality to the materials that we work with. And this group of researchers includes architects and civil engineers, bioengineers like myself, and material scientists, among many others. And we're really excited about the prospects of this kind of forward-looking vision. And if you took a walk around the museum today, which hopefully you did, it's really a beautiful place, and we can see why living systems are so wonderful, right? They have the ability to sense and respond, they adapt and they evolve, they thrive on relatively few resources, and they decay naturally. And these are all things that we would like to build into our built environment around us so that we might have a more sustainable and more functional world that we engage with. So my lab actually works more on, as Chris said, on sort of soft, squishy materials. And classically, we've been working on the problem of how can we use these materials to engineer tissues from the human body. So thinking about how we can leverage advanced materials design and advanced processes like 3D printing and additive manufacturing to reassemble hierarchical structures that might restore function in a piece of living tissue. So here I show a couple of examples, a cardiac valve and a trachea that we're working on. And in doing this research, which again the goal is now just to restore function to a damaged body part, we've learned a lot about how we can engage living systems with non-living or inanimate materials. And this is a work that is not just going on in my lab, this is work that's going on across the world, and we as a community have really learned a lot about how we can interface the living and the non-living. And so we at ETH and many other centers around the world are starting to think about, can we take these same concepts where we take living materials, whether it be mammalian cells, so cells from a human body or other mammals, or microbes or other living systems, and engage them with inanimate structures to rethink our built environment. And so if we think about the world around us, when we're walking around a city, again, like you probably did again in Berlin today, we see a lot of beautiful buildings, but they're often sterile and inanimate. And so one idea for the future might be that we could think about how we could bring life into these everyday engineered materials. So one could be, can we make self-healing concrete? So can we bring bacteria in that might sense and heal microfractures in the material before we even notice them? Or could we bring in bacteria that can pull down CO2 from the environment, use it as part of the building structure, and turn our buildings into CO2 sinks instead of CO2 sources? Could we also think about how we could maybe engineer living surfaces that sense and respond to movement? And this kind of touches on what Christiana just said. And could we also think about how this might work in our own textiles or our own structures that we wear on ourselves? Again, for thinking about how we might treat the body and help heal the body, but also now with engineered living systems. And so why do we focus again on bringing life in? And part of this is that living systems offer techniques that we as humans can't really engineer very efficiently. And I think the room that we're sitting in is a great example. So there's all these beautiful bird specimens around us. And actually, birds are really great engineers of color, again, as we can see on display here. And in one example I show here, which is the blue-winged leaf bird, they actually use structural engineering at the nanoscale to build a protein called keratin into these gyroid structures that you see in this image here. And these structures on the nanoscale interact with light, and they then give the color that we see. And this is very hard for us as engineers to do. So there's a colleague of mine at ETH, Eric Dufresne, and many of his coworkers around the world that are trying to adapt this process and really build this process so that we might be able to make pigment-free, beautifully colored structures and engineered materials. And they're going quite well, and they have really great progress on this, but yet living systems can do these kind of functions better than we still can as engineers. And so this motivates us then to think about where can we maybe embrace or leverage the benefits of living systems and try and bring them into some other aspects of structures. Beyond just maybe making a very nice aesthetically colored structure, could we also bring in other functions? So I'll just give two very brief examples of things that we're starting to think about. And so the first is in collaboration with some of my students, so Dala and then also Yifan, as well as a colleague at ETH, Benjamin Dillenberger, who's in the architecture department, and one of his very creative students, Andrea. And we're thinking about how we can use photosynthetic algae and then build them into printable materials that I showed you at the beginning of the talk, and think about then how we can actually fabricate living systems that would be able to photosynthesize, so make their own food, and then build structures with this. And this specific algae that we're working with has the ability actually to use light and resources around to pull down CO2 and mineralize it. So it can then make a ceramic-like material. And so the idea would be, can we print these into a structure that we might envision? So here I show a cup, for example. Let it incubate or let it take on light and evolve, and then could it actually then turn into a calcified material? And so some early work that we've shown seems to indicate that this kind of process is possible and feasible. And so you can see in this last image that you actually get a mineralized deposited cup. So again, this is on a very small scale. It's very early phases, but this paints a picture of what might be possible in the future of how we can pull life into our systems. We're also then working on scaling this up. So again, these living systems, if built into larger structures, like Christiana showed, maybe at the architectural scale, could potentially be used for pulling down carbon and building this into the structures that we work with. And just very finally, we're also working again with Benjamin's group, so they have really great techniques of 3D printing building materials. And could we use these bugs to reinforce these and stabilize these structures and make them, again, adapt and evolve and work with us? And so we're really excited about this possibility of building life into our built environment around us. And hopefully this gives you at least a teaser of some of the things that we're thinking about at ETH.
Very cool. That's pretty, wow. So just algae, photosynthesizing, and building structures. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, I think, again, it's early stage, but I think it's a good thing to think about and a good thing. And hopefully the tools that Massimo can offer us will allow us to do that even more efficiently.
So we've got now the third person.
Yes.
You've gone down, we're kind of in different scales here.
Yes.
And you're working at a nanoscale.
Yeah, we're working at the nanoscale.
Even further.
Yeah, atom scale to a certain extent. But I think the core point is a slightly different one, and it's good to be in the Nature Museum here in Berlin, because the truth is that for the first time in history, we can really co-design with nature. And you must say, we've been partnering with nature for centuries or even a millennia, but now we can really co-design. And this is a major, major shift in the way we can approach matter. And basically, on the one side, what is happening is that we are dramatically expanding the option space of what is possible, co-designing with nature. And there are a couple of trends that are happening that are making this possible. On the one side is that, as you're almost seeing here, you have design coming together with science, with the bridge built between the two from engineering. And before, those were disciplines that were separate, are now coming together, allowing to really think in different paradigms compared to what was the silos that you had before. And on the other side, there is another thing which is happening, which is really dramatically changing the way we operate, which is that we have, basically, we can manipulate matter, as Mark is doing right now, but it's not only that we can manipulate matter is at the level, at the atomic level, but we also have cognition and computation that is completely rising in terms of what is possible. And the problem is that those two things used to be apart, but what is happening right now is those two things are coming closer, and the way they're coming closer is that there is a sensing capability and actuation capability that is bringing the two together, and we can really, this is what allows us to really manipulate matter and basically co-design with nature. This is happening because of this combination of things, and this is a major paradigm shift. And what is happening on top of this is because we are learning quickly, and we can design, build, test, and learn. At every iteration, we get faster. And so what is happening is that we can co-design with nature, and by co-designing with nature, we're exploding the option space while we are collapsing the times by which we can get there. But that's not all the point. If you really look at what is happening right now, I think that we are in a very particular historical moment in our civilization, because the moment in which we are right now is comparable to the one that we had 10,000 years ago when we moved from being hunters-gatherers to become farmers. It's just what is happening right now. You're seeing what Mark is doing is that we're going from being hunters-gatherers of resources to become farmer at the atomic level. What you've been doing, you start from the cell, you start from the organic, you start at the atomic level. And what is happening is that there is a major, major shift, because we go from an exploitative to a generative. And when you go from exploitative to generative, you go from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance. But, and this is not only the point, is that when you do that, what happens as well is that you have a degree of precision of what you can do that it was unthinkable before. And you can start thinking on top of what is natural, and you can start thinking in a completely different way, coming up with solutions that were unthinkable before, and you can really rethink the way you do things. If you look at the way we produce nitrogen today, it's really totally exploitative, a lot of energy. It's responsible for 3-4% of all the greenhouse gas emissions, and you could say we can try to optimize this, but what is happening now? What if we can design organisms that fixate nitrogen on the plants instead of producing nitrogen? And this is a completely different paradigm. And you can apply this. You can, instead of extracting leather, you can grow leather using mushrooms. You can self-healing concrete. You can really produce new material. And there are even companies, there's one company I'm working with that is now using laser to influence and shape the geometrical structure at the atomic level, and thus changing the properties of the material by which they're working with. So they're really using laser as we're using CRISPR in modifying genetic material. They're using it to work on the inorganic side. We are more advanced on the organic side with the work that Mark and other microbiologists are doing, but I think that the next wave is going to be in the inorganic side, and then we're going to have a confluence of the two things, and we're entering a new phase for humanity in which we can really start from the atomic level with a degree of precision that we'd never had before, and really build things. It's not going to be an easy journey, because nature is complex, so we will need to learn how to deal with it. But I think that the opportunities that we have are incredible. I think that the limitation will be really in terms of rethinking the mindset by which we approach things and really think new solutions, because the option space becomes really way, way, way bigger. Orders of magnitude, and we will be able to shift from an incremental increase to a fundamental increase, orders of magnitude.
I think that's really quite interesting. Sorry, where you say rethinking the mindset. So now we have this convergence of tools, yes, convergence of opportunity, and how we rethink our mindset of what's actually doable. right? And that this is, if we have facades which can actually truly react to the environment, or combining the organic, inorganic, and you talking about your tools being able to do it.
I think it's the mindset part is really, really important because, as said, we need to learn to go back to the problems and not start from the solutions. One of the biggest problems is that we tend to start from the solution and optimize the solution. But what we need to do in this environment, if we really want to rethink materiality, we need to take a step back, go back to the problems, and then apply what we can do now to the problems and come up with new solutions. It's about coming up with new solutions. It's about paradigmatic shift. It's not incremental shift that we have had, but we need we need to be ready to do that and really take a step back and go back to the problems.
That's cool. Comments?
No, I think I agree with a lot of what Massimo said here at the end, and I think I would like to just emphasize again that the tools are really available now, and I agree with this point about mindset, and this is hard to get people to change and kind of liberate their mind a little bit and see that there's new opportunities, and many of them may not work out, but we still need to push and explore them and see, and this can create many new opportunities for the future.
Because this is part of Berlin Science Week, which is the focus on science, and all three of you have shown some really amazing steps which we're seeing, and we're trying to also hope to enthuse next generations for science. Yes. So where do you see all of your work heading? So if we look, let's say 5 years from now, or 10, where do you see it going? What is in your mind, okay, we've done it, now what? Like I've solved, so what now?
Well, if I can jump in here,
sure.
I have to think, coming from the building industry as an architect, I guess this is one of the probably slowest changeable industries worldwide. Also, they are, of course, one of the largest consumer of energy worldwide and producers of waste worldwide. So I would really hope that our approaches, and I mean, we are working very textile-based, but also the approaches of both of you are totally relevant in this field, and I see a lot of bridges that we will manage somehow to change something there and go first steps also in industry, that they understand that. Yeah, also, as I pointed out, like not working against the environment, but that we really have to understand buildings and also the surfaces of buildings, the surfaces of our cities, yeah, which are just there's a huge, large surface area, not only the roofs where we have now some photovoltaic implemented, but also the facades, everything. So that is a huge potential, and rather not see a facade as a possible intersection of loss and failure and so on, but really to see it as a potential of gaining energy and also gaining climate things for the building itself and so on. So I would really hope that the implementation of all this fantastic science that is just now really evolving into society and also into industry would make a large step forward. That would be one of my largest concerns that we, for example, with this project I showed, try to do, because we have a consortium where industry is from the beginning on involved. Yeah, and I hope
that's great.
To implement more.
Yeah, do. We have to implement. It's a sort of little bits. The more we get, the better. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I might add to this that I think that there's different, readiness levels of the different technologies that we're talking about, and I think that some are really ready, and I think should go, and some of these facade engineering, surface and roof engineering, we should just do now and implement. Some of the stuff that we're working on now, I think it's not ready in 5 years, probably not even 10 years. And I think in that timescale, what I would hope that we keep pushing is this, maybe challenging the mindset to think about how we can leverage new ideas, new tools that are available to come more to a sustainable approach to doing things. I think there's opportunities in aesthetics, in sustainability, in just rethinking the functionality of the materials we work with by bringing some aspects of living systems into them. And even if they're 20 years timeline to actually become scalable and relevant, it's still good to get people talking about this and thinking about it so that our life, I just had a child recently and I want his life to be maybe a little bit less tech heavy and sterile than the world that I see some kids growing up in.
Fair enough.
I think we have the tools to do it, and I think this is what I'm excited about.
May I stretch the time a little bit?
Go for it. I want you to do anything you want.
Let's say in 20 years we have to, because we don't have any alternative. We're willing to redo the economic and industrial tissue that we have. And what does it mean? It means that we really need to shift to this generative paradigm. And concretely, it means get rid completely of all the petrochemical stuff. We need to stop putting energy to dig stuff out of the ground, put energy to break those molecules down, and put energy to reassemble them to do additional stuff. It's complete nonsense. We should really start doing this. And that's why I go to the 20 years, because I think the next 5 years are going to be really important in terms of transition. We're going to have shift in terms of food. Food industry is going through a dramatic transformation, and those are ready. Maybe not the cultivated meat, but everything in terms of alternative protein we can produce, but really getting the change in the way we produce stuff is going to be really important, and it's going to be something which is way more distributed and less concentrated, in which we really grow stuff and not extract stuff of what we have. And we're going to have different kind of polymers, we're going to have different kind of materials, and there is going to be, the first wave is going to be really focused on added value, and then over time we're going to produce and create the infrastructure to go at scale and really substitute what is happening today. But I hope, and I think that's the right way to do it, it's not substituting, but create something which is better. Because given the level of precision that we have, we don't need to just come with alternative protein. We can come with protein which is better than the one that we have today. We can come with polymers that are better than one today. We can come with polymers that can one day substitute concrete. I know that we had this discussion and you said concrete is not bad. I think that we can, I hope that we come in 20 years to a world where concrete is a thing of the past. I know.
I have a sort of long relationship with concrete, so it's a hard one. It's a hard relationship. Yeah. So I'd say replace things where you need the heat, the intensity of the heat.
Yes.
To burn to create the cement. I think this is what, and we were talking about, you think about growing or crystallizing.
Yes.
We're allowing natural processes that do not require that intense amount of energy. Then I'm side with you. So we can also take questions now. If anyone has any questions here in the room or on Slido, I just remind those who are online, you're welcome to put something in the Slido, and I'll integrate those into conversation. Does anybody have a question here in the room right now? If so, I need you to put a hand up. And there's one up here, and then there's one in the way back as well. Great. Okay. We'll take both the questions and move.
Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas on this exciting topic. When we discuss living materials, I'm wondering to which degree are these living materials and their behavior unpredictable?
Ooh, interesting question. And we're going to take the woman in the way back. Elizabeth, you could grab it all the way to the back. We're going to take both of those. To what degrees? Ooh, I'm glad you didn't ask what's life. That would have been, yeah. Oh, you want to go ahead? Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm happy to jump in on that.
All right, and
So this is something we think about a lot. I think it's a fantastic question, and living systems, as we said, they evolve and they adapt, and that leads to inherent unpredictability. And every time we try and cage them in, they find a way out. And this is, for me, makes super fun research questions of how can we work with that. I don't think about, and Massimo said this to me before, just before we came on, that sometimes we try and cage in biology too much, and I agree with this. That we sort of need to engage and embrace it and see if we can work with it instead of thinking that we're, above biology. We're just a part of it all, right? And we're probably not going to impose strict boundaries on it. But this makes for, if you think about infrastructure, you want a time scale of decades. And if you have something that is changing on you on the time scale of days or months or years, it's really hard to think about how that's going to work. And this is one of the clear challenges that we need to address and engage with. So I think it's a fantastic question, and so we haven't solved it, but I think the community will keep working on it. Yeah.
Christiana? And then
I would also like to jump in on that, because from designers' point of view, I have to say we also have to change the way we design. I think the design has to become different. It has to become more robust. I think that this idea of designing for like a very, very specific purpose, and it has to fit right that, and it is engineered to exactly this purpose, we have to step back from that and to really think about, designs which are more open. So that can also, like in terms of the weight something can take on, there would be a wider range, or about the shape something. So a wall could just differ between this and that thickness, but it would always be a wall which is good enough to bear that load that is going to be implemented. Like a tree, for example, also has different branches and they all play together, but it's not that this tree has to have this diameter, this branch, this and that diameter. So in that sense, I also think we have to rethink design, and that's something very, very basic.
So trying to rethink robustness. What is that?
Yeah, and I wanted to build on this. I think the question is very good, and I think that there is an underlying question and statement that is very dear to my heart, because I think in this process we need basically to get rid of 300 years of Newtonism, in which we really think in terms of cause and effect, which is really beautiful because you can think that you can do A and you get B. We need to completely forget this because we're entering a space that is way more complex. We need to realize the fact that complexity and noise is a feature of nature, is not a bug. And we need to stop trying to say, okay, let's eliminate the noise. We need to really embrace it and embrace the complexity that comes with it, and really look at for emergence and not cause and effect.
Interesting. Thank you. Back in the corner.
Thank you so much for the interesting lecture. It was incredibly interesting. And I actually have a question to Christiane and Massimo. For Christiane, I know that there is some solar panels that can be actually coated, like the windows can be coated with the solar panels, and this energy can be accumulated and used for future use. Do you think it's now applicable for building the buildings? Or, and another question is to Massimo. If you said that it's we should get rid of the petroleum and stop taking it out, but do you know anything, any new compounds that can be used instead, except lithium batteries?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence?
Do you know any other compounds that can be used instead of petroleum, except lithium batteries?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got two questions. You got 2 for 1. You know, they would usually get 1 question per person, but we're generous today. Okay, so Christiane?
Yeah, I have to ask quickly back. So, I mean, you were talking about these coatings for windows, and then the question was
the photovoltaic. So there's the thin film photovoltaics, which you can now
thin film photovoltaic
onto facades. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a technology which is of course super interesting, also in terms of flexible building skins, because you can put them also on flexible substrates, and there has been first projects and thoughts about also, for example, coating yarn with it. So, but of course you could have then screens or curtains which you can slide away when there is sun, and or slide together when there is sun and slide away when there is no sun, and so on. Of course, this is a super interesting technology also for textile thinking.
Okay, then Massimo, petroleum replacement products.
Plenty of. You can, so it depends. Petroleum is used in many things. We even eat products that come out of petroleum. But petroleum is basically a polymer, is a long chain of atoms, carbon atoms, and basically they store the energy ultimately that came from the sun and then got buried, and then very intense. They have very high intensity in terms of energy condensed there, and then there are different ways you can go this way depending on where you are in the chain of petroleum. But starting with hydrogen is becoming a replacement possible for these things, and when you come to the polymer or monomer side of things, you can really design bacteria to produce all of this stuff, and there are people that are doing it. You can use algae, you can use a lot of organisms to be able to do it. So it's not a matter, right now it's more a matter of scale and price. But I know that many companies are really trying to read. There is a cosmetic company we're working with. They have still 25% of the product they're using petrochemical, but they're making a huge effort to get rid of all of it. So we don't need petroleum. We can do it differently.
That's actually very inspiring to hear that. So, are there other questions? Any other questions here in the room? Because I'm going to give you a chance to. I'm going to ask him. Then I'm going to ask him one question and come back to you. So you said something about photosynthesis. So you have algae, which you are now manipulating the photosynthetic properties of them.
They already have it. We're not.
They already have it.
Introducing.
So you figured out photosynthesis.
no. They.
No. Okay.
There are some.
But there are people who are doing this. Yeah.
And basically, one of the things that is happening right now is that we're shifting away. The work today is very much based on thermocatalysis. Is basically the petroleum and the energy that you get out of it. But we can produce, and when I say we're going to move into a generative place, is that we're starting, instead of going from bigger molecules, break them apart and extract energy, what we're doing, we're taking the sun and taking the photons, translating them into electrons, and getting from the smaller to the bigger. That's what it means to become generative. And we're doing this, and there are people that are really looking at basically create doing photo light-based catalysis, so to say. So that there are people doing that, working that. They're not there yet, though. Might take.
And in biological systems, you can take something that naturally has the know-how, the internal systems to photosynthesize and produce materials, and with biofoundries and tools like this, we can now augment or work with that system to try and improve the process. And so this is what I think will be needed to take natural systems that we really work with and leverage, is how can we kind of guide them, given the caveat that it's going to want to change on us, as was pointed out in the first question.
Wonder. But could you imagine that coming up to you gave one example where you worked with Benjamin on a building scale, but can you imagine like some of the work which Christiana is showing, how could that come into the facades?
Yeah, I mean, I think we also think about sort of sprayable materials or other things that you could put onto the surface, where the surface might be living now, and maybe it's just sensing and communicating to some activated textile, or maybe it's depositing material. Yeah, but these things I think are imaginable. Yeah.
We had a project where we basically created bricks that were leveraging urine to produce electricity using bacteria. So you have in your house and you produce electricity using your...
So you pee on the brick?
Yeah, that goes through the brick.
Oh, okay. Seriously?
Yes.
How much electricity? A lot?
Sorry?
How much electricity?
Not that much.
Okay.
It was just a proof of concept.
All right. Well, but still, that's pretty. I mean, this is what you're saying, rethinking what's normal, what's real. This is really interesting how you can imagine it. So I'm going to ask the same question to you, Christian. When you hear some of the work that they were just talking about, could you imagine how some of this could come into your work?
Excuse me?
Could you imagine how some of what Mark was talking about could come into your work?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. I already see it there. I mean, we have to start cooperating immediately, and sure. I mean, the difference is that what we do basically. I mean, we work together also with biomaterial scientists, with biologists, and so on, but not in the sense that we really use the biological material. But what we have is this kind of bioinspiration, what we call. So, what's interesting, and then in terms of textiles, is that the hierarchical building up of structures of material systems that we find in nature. So what I showed can one-to-one be transferred as an idea into the idea of fiber becoming a yarn becoming a textile weave becoming a surface, and so on. And by this, I think there is a really close connection to biology and textile thinking. And of course, when we talk about biomaterials, it's super interesting because textiles can also provide a large surface by the fiber structure. So that would be an ideal ground for fertilizing with whatever kind of biological systems.
Or urine, for example. So we have a question right here down the front. And then we have other questions. Go right here, left, or front, right? Yeah, nope. Yep.
Yeah, it's rather a comment to the question asked before. So how much we can replace of our fossil-based materials already with a bio-alternative. And it's, because I'm working in that field, it's over 90%, much more. It's rather, as Massimo said, a question of scaling, but also communication, because at the moment you talk a lot about recycling, and this is not really getting to the root of the problem, especially in a context of a circular economy. We have to think rather of biological materials that the earth can process, and at the same time, when we look at when we produce products, 80% of all the emissions and also waste is created before or with the production. So what comes out is actually only the tip of the iceberg. And so I think, this whole event is very important to spread the knowledge, and
Great.
we need more of that.
Thank you. So I'm gonna actually interpret your statement into a question, which is, if we're going to achieve this goal of getting towards a truly bio-inspired, generative society and materials-based, what are the next three steps? You said it's 20 years away. You said 20. You're doing this work now. How scalable? How quick? What needs to happen in order for us to get there? I think it's not just mindset within a consumer standpoint. There's got to be there's a few other things so we can get these rethinking the way we think about the materials.
So 20 years it's the time we have to make it happen. So that's when it closes. I think the next 5 years are going to be crucial. In terms of scalability, this is one of the biggest challenges while dealing with nature, because as Mark was saying, we cannot tell nature what to do. Things evolve, and we need to learn how to do with it. And also we need to rethink also the dealing with biology, because so far it has been really characterized and driven by biopharma, where you really have tiny quantities, huge value, but it's not set up to deal to support the kind of production that we need for these. So scalability is one of the issues, but on the other side, I think that on the positive side is because we have a generative piece, there is a limit in terms of efficiency that you can gain getting bigger. Actually, there is a point after which you have these economies of scale, and therefore then it's going to become a way more distributed environment where you have smaller distributed production facilities that are. We're going to go to a place to build on the comment before, where we're going to move from value chains into value nets, where you have what is the waste stream from one piece become the feedstock for the next process, and it's more. You're starting already seeing these. There are companies that are at steel plants that are taking the exhaust gases, use bacteria to produce different things, even fuel with it.
But is this going to be another northern, western advance, and just to find a way for us to carry on, or is this truly going to be able to be something which goes global?
It has too, but you can see already Singapore is quite advanced, and actually they have a bit of an advantage for certain things because they don't have the regulatory hurdles that we have, and they're really quick to bring things to market. China is investing dramatically. We just don't know, but or they're not going in the public, but they're doing incredible stuff on the biology side, and all of a sudden we're going to wake up and realize that they're ahead of us because they're really putting a lot of money, and then. But I think the point that you're making, there is a very important comment to be done here, is that this evolution cannot be top down, and as it is evolving, and we don't know yet what is going to come out completely, we need to engage in a dialogue with society to really think through what are the second and third order consequences, and being open that we don't know, but we want to have a dialogue to make sure that it goes in the right direction.
Because so often with science we expect you to know. That's your job, to know, right? So we don't like that I don't know answer, right? So another question. Gisbert had one. Does anyone else have a question? I know you have I could just see these thought bubbles going off all over there. Then, all right, Gisbert.
Yeah, I'm not trying to hijack.
I know you're not. That's what I'm saying. Come on, everyone.
Truly curious here, because nasty question. 30, 35 years ago, we had very similar discussions about bionics taking over manufacturing, evolution theory, inspiring scientific discovery. What makes you so confident that this time this idea of bio-inspired materials is here to stay?
Good question.
So again, I can
Go for
start
it.
with an answer.
Go for it.
So I wasn't there for the conversation 35 years ago. So I was as old as my son is now, I guess, so a few months old then. But I see the point. And first of all, I would say I'm not so confident that it's here to stay and that we're going to solve everything. I think would be too much hubris to say that. But I think that we have many more tools in the synthetic biology side, or how to think about how we can engage with biology, not just as passive observers, but people who can work with it now. And those tools were starting maybe a few decades ago, but now they're much more advanced. And we can, for not too much money, talk to Massimo, buy a whole gene circuit and encode new genetic circuits into bugs and have them work with us and add new functionalities to a system. Again, that doesn't mean that now it's solved and that's going to work, but I think we have new tools on that side. We have new materials and processing tools, and I think that we have more demand from society for something that is a bit more sustainable, that is more, I guess the sustainable is what I would say.
Christiana?
I would like to add there, because I think this former discussion was very much a top-down discussion, also from this point of view from high technology. Only very skilled people or institutions could solve things and so on. And being at an art school and design school here in Berlin, I have to say that I really feel it very strongly from what you just said, so from societal impact, and that people, young designers, young people, they go out and they do these startups and they really try, and even with very simple means sometimes they try and they succeed to change something. And so I think it's more like at this time this grassroots and very implemented in society movement. But on the other side, as Mark said, I'm also not convinced, or I can't guarantee or so, but I think it's the only thing that we can do is to try, and we don't have another way to go at the moment.
Massimo, what?
I'm more bullish.
I knew you were going to be.
I'm more bullish also because we don't have an alternative.
Yeah.
We really don't have an alternative, and we really, sorry if I keep going there, but we really need to change the paradigm and really rethink, because an exploitative model starts with a finite amount of stuff, and it's a scarcity model. It's not sustainable, as we're seeing. So we need to change this, and I'm bullish because even 5 years ago, Mark will confirm, we were not able to do the stuff that we're doing. We are, we were able to do, I'll give you a data point. Normally when you play with DNA, you are between 5 and 10,000 base pairs. To give you terms of reference, the human body has 3 billion base pairs, so we are able to synthesize and put together between 5 and 10, 15,000 is the place. And to give you an idea, the team where we are now, so we can deliver 42,000 base pair. So this is just really happening now, and we're moving, and we're going to go to over 100,000. There is a limit to what you can do there. But the important thing is that the first time we did it, it took us 6 months. The second time we did it, it took us 3 months. The last time we did it took us 21 days. And you're seeing, this is what I was saying, it's the expanding of the option space, but the collapsing of the time. And that's why I think that we're going to really see more and more of this happening. And it's already happening today. I met yesterday with a startup here in Berlin, and they produce whey and casein. It's basically they're doing cheese out of bacteria. It's happening now. It's not the future, and they just raise money to do it, and it's going to be soon in the supermarket.
So I think that's actually a really wonderful question to come to our closing ramp. I'm going to add something to that, because I think, as you've indicated, I think from your tools, without the computational capacity which we now have, this would not be possible.
Absolutely not.
Right? You say from your high-tech side, you couldn't have even imagined. I mean, again, this is, as I said at the very beginning, a material scientist's dream 20 years ago that one could ever even begin to think about this. So I think that's number one. Number two, as you've indicated, there's an urgency. And I think that is felt not only by us, but by generations all over the world. And so I think there's this, and this is where I think we have a better chance this time around with this urgency. And the third, so I have five. The third is the global awareness. I think this is also becoming something which is quite intriguing, that your work can now go global very quickly. We become more aware of global trends, but there's also global expectation. That you think globally, you act locally, but now the next one is frugal innovation. This comes to responding to what you said about this has been very top down, but there's also a massive movement with frugal innovation. So when we begin to be able to have your distributed distilleries or
biofoundries.
Biofoundry. Well, sorry, I'm getting ready for the apéro. Looking at the wine bottles over there, going, okay, and a beer. No, if you think about this capability of getting out and distributed.
Yes.
I think this frugal innovation is really needed and recognized. And I think, and to end with that is there is no choice. There is no planet B, or planet C, or D, or E. So this is the one beautiful one that we have.
But we only have 20 years. That's why I said
we've got 20 years. I'd say we have 10.
Yeah, you're right.
So this is what we're about.
Yep.
So I want to thank you three very, very much for a delightful conversation. I love talking with smart people. And all of you completely satisfied my thirst for learning, and I want to learn more about your work. But thank you for sharing your wisdom and your passion with us. And let us give them a round of applause to say thank you. Thank you. And I wish to thank all of you very, very much for choosing to come here to join us, either online or here in the room, for this Rethinking Materiality conversation. We do have another conversation which the ETH Zurich will be hosting tomorrow at 11 o'clock entitled The Robots Are Coming. And you can also join that virtually. Unfortunately, there are no more seats. And you can find information for that on our website or on the website of the Berlin Science Week. And we would like to invite all of you who are here, and I wish I could invite all of you online as well, but I can't, to have a drink of something alcoholic or non, and a bit of a nibble, and to continue a conversation with our guests. So with that, thank you very, very much, and see you soon.
Thank you, Chris.